Well, I have 6:30 on the nose, so we will go ahead and begin. The mayor is out of town today, so I will be running the meeting again. So if everybody could just chip in a few bucks, I think it kind of cover my expenses, maybe 4 or 5, something like that. I hate to start off with this as I did my last meeting, but I think everyone here is probably aware of the shooting at Virginia Beach last Friday, which hits very close home to us because it was at a municipal complex, very similar to ours. Individual walked in and 12 people lost their lives, I believe 4 to 5 injured. One was a police officer whose vest stopped the round, thank God. Would like to take a moment of silence to recognize the victims, and if you pray for their families, it might be an appropriate time to do so, if you would now. Thank you. All right, thank you. We have 3 listed items on the agenda this evening. The first item is going to talk about road cost at Kurzweil, Ward, and Kelly. Some of you may remember that Councilmember Barber and I have had a strong desire for some time to expand the transportation plan to include some type of outlet or improvement of one of the existing outlets for the city out to 150. A lot of our citizens use that route going to and coming home from work. And so I believe that's going to be what Mr. Fearborn and staff are going to speak to us about on item 1. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct, sir. I'm going to be passing around. We'll start with Ward Road and work our way to the west. Mr. Kraft will be making the presentation. There are 2 pieces. I've got them cross-hatched for Ward Road. They'll pass around now. Mr. Krass, as soon as these are around, you can begin.
Good evening, Council. We were tasked with looking at some cost estimates for various scenarios, as Mr. Fearborn said, for Ward Road, Kurzweil Road, and Kelly. These are very high level. We're going to be talking about very high level. These estimates don't have the benefit of survey. They don't have the benefit of any geotechnical work. We basically did our estimate based on air photo information. So there's a lot more detailed information that will be needed to be gathered in order to come up and firm up numbers. Kind of as a fact estimate check, looking across the country, road reconstruction of this type is about $3.5 million a mile. So these numbers are within that order of magnitude. So the first Ward Road reconstruction estimate, the $7.5 million, involves complete reconstruction of the road from 58 Highway to 163rd Street. That's where Lee Summit's project is terminating now, just south of the lake inlet. We're looking at a three-lane urban section, curb and gutter, doing some drainage improvements at the lower area there where Alexander Creek comes and the road is overtopped, putting in some culverts there. So that's what we're looking at if you want to go to a complete urban section to tie in with Lee Summit, starting at 58 Highway. So I'm available for any questions council may have regarding that.
And then what we're going to be doing with the second group of sheets is obviously $7.5 million is a considerable amount. So I asked Mike and his team to go back and step that down. We'll call this Cadillac, and then The next page
Working our way to the
is
Yugo.
kind of starts with going all the way down to the VW. Then we kind of get to the Mustang. Then we get to a Suburban on the last page, which is the same thing that Mike just described to you all, except a shorter distance. Mike, take it away.
Sure. So the first estimate, and again, these quantities are several years old. We know the road has deteriorated considerably. What the first estimate looks at doing is only dealing with our side of the road from 58 Highway to the Water District 3 offices. That's the north boundary line of the Ward Park Place subdivision. We would do some extensive patching and then microsurface over the top of the patches. The estimated cost for that is $741,000. The second option involves the complete width of the road, patching everything from 58 Highway to the north property line of the Ward Park Place subdivision. That has an estimate of $1.3 million. The final estimate is, as Mr. Fearborn said, is very similar to the first one we talked about, except the project stops at the north line of Ward Park Place. So there's another couple thousand feet gap between that and where Lee Summit's project terminates. We estimate that project to be $4.5 million.
And tonight is purely informational for the council, all of these items. We recognize that there is the very real possibility that a bond issue is in the council's considerations future. And so we wanted these numbers out there for you all's prioritization when we get to that point. And of course, we'll be able to, as we get closer to that day, we'll be able to update these numbers. We've got everything down now where we can kind of plug and play each of the numbers.
Thank you. Have we had any further conversations with county about this road? I know we've had conversation with them in the past, and John and I have really talked a lot about Ward Road and gotten some estimates before, but I know that's always been part of the conversation that we have with people as to why we can't fix this road right now. Besides the astronomical cost, it's not our road entirely.
Exactly. And I'm sure that the county would be more than happy to allow us to go in and completely repair the road on their half. I didn't think so. I'm trying to put a positive spin on this. Prior to this point in time, we were told not to even bother to approach the commission. We were asked to wait until the fall following getting a new presiding commissioner in who may very well be a little bit more open to those discussions. They're not going to have any more money than we have, and they have no bond issue on the horizon, so it probably would not, if they are okay with doing something and would enter into an MOU with us, it would probably not be an even split like it was with Kansas City. We would be bearing a considerable amount more than the county. But we intend to begin those talks towards the end of the summer for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Fearborn, if we were to partner with the county on this scenario, would that incorporate us doing some annexation of that property as well too, or the road?
I doubt that seriously, sir.
I know that was the case in the past, but that's the case going forward too.
Especially if we annexed it in, the county would have no reason to partner because it would be all our road by then.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This question is for Mr. Crass. Obviously, the $7.5 million, that's a total rebuild, brand new road, start fresh. To do the first scenario and the second scenario, what would be the life expectancy? What would you estimate? How many, if we did say the first or second, how many years would that buy us?
I think it would buy, well, the first estimate is tough because you're only doing half the road. And so the other half of the road is still deteriorating. You're still getting water into the subgrade. It would probably have a fairly short lifespan as the subgrade softens from the moisture and everything getting in there. The second option would have a slightly longer life. The challenge you get into as you are doing patches in one area and not in others, you still get some differential settlement. So you'll get reflective cracking. So eventually, wherever the patches are is going to reflect back through, and you're going to end, even though you put an overlay over the top of it, maybe 5-6 years without the need to do some additional extensive cracks. And you see that on 58 Highway, where you'll see the lane cracks from where they left the old road bed in place, and that creates a shear plane. So that's why you get the cracks along the striping where the road is. It would be better, but not as good as completely reconstructing the road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I don't know if this question is appropriate now or for the next agenda item. Some of the other questions have already been asked. With respect to the residents in these areas and the potential other MoDOT projects and the timeline for those MoDOT projects, depending on if these come to the council for approval and budgeting, does that put us in a time constraint to secure funding to have construction going at the same time so the roads are done, so we don't have a MoDOT project and a potential city project that puts them in, a construction zone for 2 years?
The MoDOT project that is item B on here is imminent. They are, whereas even if we were to be able to pass a bond issue in the next year, there's still going to be an extended time, because they're going to be starting before us, even if on the next ballot issue that we can get this bond issue to, they're still going to be ahead of that, I have a feeling.
Okay, that was just trying to work out timeline for project and continue. Granted, we just have the Ward Park Place residents, but looking at the different options, and I would concur with whatever route we went, not saying yea or nay or anything right now, because that's not the discussion. It's just to present things to us. Just concerned about the timeline for that particular stretch of road and everyone who needs to use it, particularly our residents in that particular area. So, thank you.
And I'll be able to expound some on that on the next agenda item, because there's even more pain than that with those particular projects. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I just want to share one kind of final thing, again, because I know Ward Road's been a hot topic for John and I and in Ward 4. So in the event that someone from Ward 4 is watching and wondering about Ward Road, I don't think we ever really shared any of these numbers. So the estimate to make it the super duper Cadillac, to make it just like Lee Summit all the way from 58 to Lee Summit's project, we're looking at $7.5 million over that for that estimate. The one to only do the Raymore side, which in my opinion is not even something we should consider. I understand why we would, but for people who are driving that road, it doesn't make any sense. And so that's $741,000 plus. The option 2 that we looked at with the life expectancy of 5 to 6 years, basically patching and resurfacing the whole road, not all the way to Lee Summit, but to Ward Park Place, we're looking at $1,300,000 plus, and then the final one to actually do it right, but not all the way to the Lee Summit project, we're looking at $4.5 million. So I know that this question comes up a lot for us, and I think it's good for people to hear those numbers to help them realize why we're not just getting this done, besides the problem we have with only owning half of the road. So thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you. Mrs. Dugwad hit on a point that I just need clarification on. With the Cadillac version of the options that we have here, that extends beyond our city boundaries. So how would we, if we don't have a cost share, how would we, if this was to go forward, as the recommendation, how would we be able to do that, fund that down that, beyond our city boundaries when we have a very similar concern with 58 Bridge that is outside our boundaries that we can't do anything with?
If we get permission from again, 58 Highway Bridge is MoDOT.
MoDOT.
If we went to MoDOT and said, we'll go ahead and do this bridge for you, again, like before, I guarantee they'll jump all over that.
Correct.
It would be the same thing out here. We'd be going to the county and saying, we'd like to go ahead and improve the road in your county.
But with
Can we go
no-
ahead and do it?
No reciprocation back on, without asking for it and then being in good faith and having the
We'd-
opportunity to
we'd-
do it.
Even if we were doing that, we'd get an MOU with them that gave us the okay to go onto their property.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. This kind of what all came about before I got on a year ago, but I know about Ward Road. But basically, when we talk about Ward Road, we're talking the city limits from here, which is south to the north side of our city limits on Ward Road, I'm assuming. And when you say in the middle and separating it, do we not control or own that Ward Road from the city limits, north and south, the whole road, or we just own half of it? So we just own half. So this one would take us all the way down to the end of 58 there with the county still, we've talked about. And this would always take us up to where Ward, or at least Summit has done their work that they're doing now, I'm assuming, on the big one. It would take us all the way and join Lee
That's
Summit.
correct. The big one takes us, improves the entire thing.
Okay, all the way 58, all the way to the Lee Summit line where they're working now. But it's only, now that would cover the whole road. Okay, not just half down the middle. And like Mr. Kraft said, once you start doing a half a street, the sad thing is when you get into half streets, deterioration is going to multiply quickly with weather and storms and deterioration of cold and heat. And then you'll be doing it over and over and trying to patch it, and then everybody's going to complain because it's patching all the time. Yeah, so either way, yeah, but the cost shares are so high, I know. So, but maybe down the road, if we did something like that, we could talk to the county. Maybe Mr. Houston and the commission might down the road say, hey, we might be able to do something with you if we allow you to do that, but we come back and maybe get something out of them in the future, help on the cost share. I don't know. Something might ask them, I guess. Thank you.
I would say Ms. Abdelgawad's comments are well taken. Just for a matter of reference, to bring the ward, or to bring Ward up to complete reconstruction, as we would all like to see it, and I don't travel on it that often, but I'd like to see it as that way too. I do travel on it. It's, that'd be great. At $7.5 million, that's 75% of our last entire GEO bond project. The real Band-Aid that gives us maybe 4 to 5 years at $741,000 is about 75% of the entire cost of the mill and overlay of 58 through our entire city limits from the last GEO bond project. So it is an unenviable situation. I don't want to be here. I would love to be able to do this, but it is fraught with costs and peril because we don't own the entire road. So anyhow, it's good information to have, sir. Thank you very much. Because I think most citizens look at this like, why can't we do it? It's a tough one, it really is. So let's move on to item B, and,
We still have 2 more roads, sir.
oh, we do, yeah. We're cruising, I'm sorry.
We do the same thing here. It is 2 pages. It's the big, the ledger one, and then a smaller page behind, which is going to take kind of the same format that we just now did. Mike, or Mr. Krass, if you'd wait till these are out as well.
Thank you, Mr. Fairborn. The next roadway we're going to be talking about is Kurzwell Road, and we've got this broken down into 2 segments. It's always a challenge presenting estimates to Mr. Fairborn because the first question he asks is how many commas, and then it's how many numbers left of the comma. So what Similar to what we did with Ward Road, the first segment is from 58 Highway to 155th Street, which is completely within the city limits of Raymore. Similar reconstruction to what we described for Ward Road, that we estimate to be $11 million plus a little change. We were then also asked to look at going from 155th Street north all the way to 150 Highway, basically reconstructing Horridge Road, as well as doing some intersection work because of the skew and the offsets at 155th Street. That segment of roadway is $4.4 million, so the total cost we estimate to reconstruct Kurzweil Road to an urban section from 58 Highway all the way to 150 Highway is $15.6 million.
But it'll look really good. Go ahead on part two for this one, Mike.
A second option we were asked to look at is just to address a lot of the areas that are deteriorating because of where we're doing the patching. It's in the low areas. It's where the subgrade gets saturated because of poor drainage. So what we've looked at there is an option where we put in the box culverts, do some subgrade corrections, put in some under drains, just get the road back to where the subgrade is stable and won't be impacted by the moisture and the runoff the way it is now. It would be still a two-lane urban section, and we estimate that the cost of that project to be almost $777,000, almost $800,000.
Mike, I noted in Mr. Rocco's email to me when he sent this across that he had reasons for not recommending this.
There's some issues with doing this. We don't address all of the subgrade issues. We don't. There are some additional costs with potentially redoing box culverts, some other things if we are going to go to the ultimate section in the future. From the engineering standpoint, we do have some concerns about the life expectancy of this road. We aren't completely treating all of the subgrade. We're just targeting some targeted subgrade areas. Question was asked, how long will this one last? I asked Greg for an estimate that the next city engineer will deal with in 9 years, so we're hoping somewhere along that line. There is a lot of risk with investing this much money into that road and not without expecting there's going to be additional annual maintenance there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Krass, I think you've touched on this, but if we did proceed with this estimate for roughly $250,000 or $750,000, the box culverts, are those scalable if we did do the bigger project later where we could keep
They need to be extended, and then we could also look at, if we need to, adding additional cells. So yes, they are scalable.
But we're not spending money here on other than the asphalt for stuff that, this will all be an investment towards the next step. To some
Yeah, the
extent.
risk is the areas that we're not working in.
Right, okay. Thank you.
This one's at least easier to pass out. Faking you. Okay, Mr. Krass.
So the last road segment we were asked to look at was Kelly Road from 150 Highway to 155th Street. what we've looked at here is putting in an urban, 2-lane urban section with curb and gutter. There are some challenges with this. It is in multiple cities. It's outside the city limits. There is no right-of-way, so we'd have to completely acquire right-of-way, just like we did with Kentucky Road. The estimate for that, just to do that segment, is $2.5 million. We then looked at as traffic has been growing, the kind of the jog from Kelly Road to Kentucky is not really good from a transportation standpoint. We get a lot of cars backed up on Kentucky, we get a lot of cars backed up on Kelly. So we looked at, similar to what we're doing on Kentucky Road at the south end, there's some property that we could squeeze an S-curve in that would connect Kelly Road to Kentucky just south of the water reservoir. We could squeeze it in there so that it would make the road continuous. At one time, Kentucky Road was supposed to extend north to 150, be part of Raytown Road. Probably not going to happen. But we did look at it, and it is possible to then make a continuous road from 58 Highway all the way to 150, which we think would address a lot of traffic issues there at that seem to be growing along 155th Street, especially since it seems to become the 150 bypass now. That concludes my presentation. I am available for questions.
So the council knows that we also, similar to going to the county in the fall, we have actually approached Grandview because the entirety of Kelly Road is under Grandview. They actually did it, no, it's Grandview, isn't it?
The north end, I'm sorry. I talked to Dennis Randolph about that. The north end is split between Kansas City, or all in Grandview, then it kind of skews over so that about the southern 2/3 to 3/4 is split between Kansas City and Grandview.
So we are approaching them relative to a partnership possibility. We know that Kansas City, obviously, we have a history with. They might be interested. In this case, the difference would be that we would not take over the road. What we would probably try to do within an MOU, especially if we brought it up to these standards, is look at maintenance every 10 years and rotating the maintenance between the three entities. And of course, we'd be maintaining a road that was outside of the city limits, but maybe we could be last in that particular rotation. Grandview didn't shut the door. They said that they would be willing to talk. I had an odd conversation with their city manager about it, and it was, if you could convince my council that this is a true partnership and not us coming to you hat in hand, in other words, the political reality of you guys can't maintain your stuff, so we're going to come in and do it for you. He said that that would not go over with his council, although it seems to be kind of true, but it would not go over with his council at all. So we'd have to be very, very careful and delicate within those negotiations with them. I would suspect that Troy Schulte would say the same thing about this particular road that he said about 155th Street, and let's get something done. That concludes staff report on item A, sir.
Yep. Mr. Crash, you mentioned this S-curve coming out of Kentucky over to Kelly. Are you looking at maybe four-way stop there, or what were you looking to try to help with traffic flow?
Yeah,
Just curious.
yes, I would envision a four-way stop then at Kelly, Kentucky, and 155th Street.
So if I get this right, we would actually do the curve, which is on the south side of 155th, and right? And that is what, Belton Prosper in that area?
Yes, it's.
That's Belton.
Yes, it's within Belton.
Belton, yeah, where we would put the road would be in Belton Prosper. Okay, and what we would do is go there, curve it in, and take the rest of that piece of Kelly and just get rid of it, or would it
We would be utilizing it as a service road.
Service road?
Yeah, and we'd still, there's a private drive there, so we'd have to work on that as well.
Oh, okay. But that is Belton, and we've talked to Belton, and Belton has no issue, I guess, if we want to run a road in through there?
We have not opened those discussions with them
Oh,
yet.
okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I'm trying to envision, Mr. Krass, I'm looking at Google Maps at 155th and Kelly in Kentucky. Are you looking at making an S-curve through that field that goes behind someone's home, or?
Yes.
Okay. Because with none of this in writing before and just figures and no actual, I'm trying to get up to speed. All right, thanks.
Yeah, we were actually going to be showing GIS maps of all of this, but the computer's down.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. So as I hear tonight for the 3 roads that we looking at just preliminary numbers for, a considerable amount of the cost will go towards either repairing, replacing areas outside the city limits.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Mike, you alluded to this in the beginning of your presentation about this one, and none of these numbers are great, but this one certainly is the most palatable of the ones we see here as far as getting a road that's more usable and improving, a good, safe road that our citizens are going to use, albeit outside the city. You alluded to the MARC project that's on the books but not funded to extend Raytown Road to the south. I'm curious if MARC would consider, if we were to hit the jackpot and get Grandview to cooperate and not hurt their feelings, and the same thing with Kansas City, and we came up with a portion, if MARC would consider this a revision of that plan and contribute as well.
The project would have to go through the scoring process, and I don't think it would score very well. It'd be very similar to the types of projects that we submit, because it doesn't really connect to. There's a number of points you get when you're within the urban boundary of Kansas City: social justice, activity centers, employment areas that this road segment doesn't connect to, and so it would not score very well. But we could, and Kansas City or Grandview would have to sponsor the project, and both of those have other competing needs.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Townsend?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. And just to clarify my earlier statement and question, I pointed out, I wanted to make a reference to that, the cost necessary and the effort to fix the commuting and transportation concerns and travel concerns our residents have, is that, they exist outside our city limits, and it takes a considerable coordination with other entities, as Mr. Mayor Pro Tem brought up with the MARC, and trying to find ways to amicably, distribute funds, beyond the nucleus of Kansas City. And when we don't meet all the criteria based on their scoring criteria, because we don't have transportation, because we don't have, as Mr. Krass has already stated. So it creates challenges trying to take care of the needs of our residents when it's beyond our city limits, and it adds another layer of politics, adds another layer of, the technicals getting in, trying to figure out how to make this work legally. So I just wanted to, kind of clarify that statement. Not that staff is doing an excellent job of presenting this to us and giving us some ideas and what the, preliminary costs would be. But as you stated earlier, once we start, doing actual surveys and doing some, digging down into the weeds of the matter to figure out the true cost, this is a good visual that we can use to kind of go now to different entities and start saying, look, on top of the surveys we've had for years saying that we need to do something to support transportation infrastructure into the city, this is what it's going to take. And so we're going to need some support on different avenues to do that. So I just wanted to make sure that, it wasn't a slight on staff. It's just, I just wanted to kind of make that, address that concern that we are trying to look at, different ways and what the cost would be, and we understand what our budget is, and yes, we can't fund all of this because it would, there's an opportunity cost there. So what are we going to forego to do this, to do any element of this. So we have to really look at that from that perspective. But I do appreciate these coming before us, so that, you know, now as we sit on Mark and we hear the different conversations going on around us, you know, we can say, well, this is what we need, and this is why we need it, and this is what we need to, now what can we do to kind of get there? So, again, that was my soapbox real quick. Thank you.
I would agree. There's a lot of work here, but I think it has value. It may not have value today, but I think it will in the future. Even though those estimates would be old at that point, we would have a starting point, and we would know kind of what kind of things would need to go in there, and then you can adjust, obviously, for an inflation. But should the door open, and they do occasionally, we never would have thought we'd have got the north section of 155th until Mr. Fearborn and staff dug into it. And if you're not familiar, both Councilmember Townsend and Mr. Crass are on the Mark Transportation Committee. Is that correct? And so that's very good for us, because even though they are fighting the uphill battle of it's not inside the Kansas City Loop and the urban core, they are trying to fight for projects that not only are important to us, but in a very fast-growing segment of the metropolitan area, not just us, but North Cass County as well. So this is good data to have. I think we'll probably see more things like this. We've known from our surveys for a number of years the vast dissatisfaction. There isn't a lot on our survey, but what there is are things outside the city limits of Raymore. It's people traveling to and from work and coming into the city and leaving, and they want things better, aka the bridge at 58. So we've got good people on it. Thank you very much, Mr. Fearborn and staff, for this information. It's very good. And now we're ready for item B.
Thank you, sir. Just to intro the topic, MoDOT is going to be doing improvements at 58 and Ward and 58, it's a set of two, sir. They look alike, but they're not. Yeah, if you could just pass these down. There you go, sir. These projects are going to happen. They are budgeted. They have been obviously already, there's some preliminary engineering that is going on. It is a question of MoDOT being nice enough to, just playing hide and seek with you there, being in that mode where they'll be getting public input on them. They are going to be establishing roundabouts at both of these locations. And they are open to some other issues, not these particular intersections, but some other issues that I'll get to after Mike describes exactly what's going to be going on here. Mr. Crass.
Thank you, Mr. Fearborn. I'm not sure which, I think Ward Road is the first one that was passed out. So as Mr. Fearborn indicated, MoDOT has completed their analysis of both these intersections and determined that installing roundabouts are the safest long-term solution to address the traffic issues. So at Ward Road, they are planning a three-legged intersection. They aren't at this time proposing a lot of grade changes there. The sight distances are very adequate for the speed of the roadway. The second drawing you have is the intersection of Prairie Lane and 58, where you can see the roundabout is proposed to be offset slightly to the west. They are also looking at lowering this intersection. Right now, they're looking at 2 to 3 feet. We've encouraged them to take a look at lowering the road as far as they can to improve sight lines there. They do get some challenges with the house in both the northeast and southeast corners. As you lower the road, the grading limits and utilities et cetera, create some challenges there, but they are taking another look at that. The project is programmed for, both of these are programmed for 2021. And that concludes what I'm available for any other questions. Turn it back to you, Mr. Fairborn.
Thank you, Mr. Krass. Chief Zimmerman, if you wouldn't mind coming up and discussing accident data at both of these intersections.
Well, I'm sure the council is familiar with the number and severity of accidents that both are investigated by the Raymore Police Department and the Highway Patrol as well. We just had a very serious accident where 4 individuals were injured in that at that intersection last week. We had a fatality out there in 2016 at that intersection as well. It's a line of sight. It's a speed issue. Obviously, individuals coming off of I'm off of Prairie Lane, I'm sorry, onto 58 or trying to get across traffic and not being able to see far enough in either direction to make sure that cross traffic isn't coming. And, in some instances, it's just people not being familiar with that the fatality accident that happened, that was actually investigated by the Highway Patrol, that happened in 16 was just an elderly gentleman who wasn't familiar with the area. So, we do have a lot of accidents in that area. A number of those accidents are injuries and very serious injuries, with speed being the contributing factor because of the speed limit on 58 highway. I'm happy to share numbers with you. We did an analysis of 16 through year-to-date in 19, and at Prairie Lane and 58, there have been 18 accidents at that intersection with varying severity of injuries, from no injuries at all to obviously fatalities in that area. And that is just accidents that were investigated by Raymore. In 2016, in that same time frame, there were 6 injuries investigated by the Highway Patrol, or 6 accidents with injuries investigated by the Highway Patrol, and then the fatality that I mentioned as well. At Ward Road, there have been 11 accidents, including 1 fatality during that same time frame as well.
Thank you, Chief. So MoDOT is bearing the cost entirely for these, and there was a considerable discussion with them about timing of the work, because Ward Park, there's going to be a great with improvement comes great disruption in this particular case. Mike, do you remember, are they going to do both of these at the same time? I think they are, yeah.
Yes, they are.
If we're going to shut it down, again, to whoever made the statement, if we're going to shut it down, let's shut it down once and not have it carry out over a 2-year period. We are going to have a real challenge with East Middle School on these. And I don't know if they've been able to explain to this particular individual, but relative to this most recent accident, we actually have somebody coming in pleading with the council to see to it that something is done, even though it's not our area. It was apparently a young man there is a young lady who is still hospitalized relative to that accident, and I believe his family knew the other family, and so he is going to be appearing in front of you on Monday night, as a matter of fact, about this. Obviously, we'll have to get the school district significantly involved in this. These 2 intersections need to be addressed. We've all known they've needed to be addressed for years and years. MoDOT recognized that, especially after the 16 fatality accident occurred there, and so they put their full resources to it. The conversation with MoDOT ended pretty interesting, actually. They were talking about all of the pain that is going to go on with this, and we were saying, we were talking to them about the fact that we have also looked at this as a road outside of the city limits that is perhaps as much critical to our citizenry as the 3 roads that were in item A here, maybe in some cases a little bit more, especially with the middle school out there. And they jumped right in and said that this would be an ideal project that they would partner with the city on the cost for. And they actually have a program that's in place for that. So our next cost estimates that we're going to be bringing to the council based on that particular meeting are the improvements to the degree that they are possible all along 58 Highway to go with these to make that a completely safe stretch of road. There will be significant difficulties with that. We would like to see enough shoulder on that road that people could be pulled over safely. They're not even sure that that can be done. As a matter of fact, they're putting their engineers on those improvements as well.
They were starting to do some preliminary work in that regard, yes, sir.
So we will be letting the council know what they come back with and the costs that would be associated with the improvements that they're talking about. It'll be decades before it's improved to the degree that it can be, but looking at the annexation efforts down the line, this, and especially the targeted area that we're looking at for the first phase of that, this would seem to be a logical step in that process. That concludes staff report on this item, sir.
Any questions, staff? Mr. Townsend?
There's a quick question, Mr. Krass, on, if you know it, I don't know if you do or not. Just curious, why not signalize intersections as opposed to a roundabout eating up some land mass?
We talked with MoDOT a little bit about that. MoDOT does not install traffic signals until warrants are met, and because of the way the traffic is, their warrants will not be met for a considerable amount of time for a traffic signal. So the intersection, just then to go in and just do an intersection, doesn't really address the issues that are causing the accidents.
They're also concerned about the fact that the traffic signal may actually increase the public safety issue with people going by on rights. And
Mr. Barber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Obviously, the speed on 58 is 55. These are not 55-mile-an-hour roundabouts, I assume. So is one of the things that they're planning on doing is drop the speed at 58, or how they, I'm kind of getting the weeds, but I'm just curious on how that's going to work.
Within the vicinity of the roundabout, the speed limit would be dropped, and that's really their function, is to slow traffic down at the intersection to make it safe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. This is just, I don't know who this is addressed to, just to the group here, but I was looking at preliminarily buses going to the East Middle School. If they were to utilize Gore and then jog to the left and then take 163rd, they could make right turns all the way to the school. If they were to use Hubuck, it would never be safe to turn left on 291. So that might be, would bus traffic be able to be feasible on those roads?
I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Barber, for asking the speed limit question. That was, even though it does feel like it's in the weeds, that was a question that I thought about and a concern I had. Considering most roundabouts have a speed limit of like 25, are we going to have people driving 55, slowing down to 25, 55? It's going to be like a drag racing between those two roundabouts. I'm concerned about that, and just voicing my opinion, it seems like an odd place for a roundabout to me, but I know the statistics that they're safer as far as accidents go. And just sharing, MoDOT's, I feel like, has been pretty good with us working at Prairie since the accident in 2016. They did, make it so there wasn't such a bump coming onto the highway. They put extra signs out there, but obviously that hasn't been enough. So I think that's great evidence for us as far as looking at a roundabout. People aren't going to be happy about it. So I think that's one thing to consider is we have tried other things before this, and it might be good for me, and speaking for John, since this is a lot of our people in Ward 4 here, maybe some of those statistics about how roundabouts are safer than regular intersections would be good to share out again.
MoDOT's MO is they hold public hearings and get the pain out of the way. We won't be there. And protection only. But they do hold the public hearings. These won't be anything like the roundabouts that we're seeing here in the city. These are huge. These are what you're seeing like out on 291 and 50 highway as you get off of the highway. These are very large roundabouts. So the speed limit goes down, but it might not necessarily be going down to that 25.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I had the occasion to talk to one of the officials at MoDOT recently regarding this, and my understanding of this is a 30-mile-an-hour roundabout, is what I was told, 30. And to note, too, this is already a 45-mile-an-hour intersection, so we're only taking the speed down 15. These intersections are already, or at least I know the one on Ward Road, or Prairie Lane, rather, is a 45-mile-an-hour intersection. 40? Okay, 40. So we're talking about 10 miles an hour reduction. And for whatever it's worth, I fully support these roundabouts. I think it is hands down a much safer and better solution than putting a traffic light in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Anyone else? Mr. Sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. Mr. Krass, when you guys have talked to MoDOT on this, did they give you any kind of a direct timeline with weather and seasons? We'll start at point A to Z, and it'll probably 18 months, 2 years. They have any kind of ideas?
They'll complete it in the construction season 2021.
So just a couple of things to add on, and Mr. Krass, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks, if I'm reading the drawings correct, these would be single-lane roundabouts. Is that correct? They're not multi-lane roundabouts?
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, we've got the raised median barriers on all approaches.
Yes.
Stop crossover traffic. Construction season, by the way, I know we have concerns about the school, and there would be obviously some impact to the school, but the majority of the construction season is during the what we typically see as moderate weather, not the monsoon season, but that would flow over into the summertime, so there's less impact certainly then on the school than there would be if we're running during the school year. I'm not a fan of roundabouts, but in this particular scenario, I would agree. I think it's probably the best solution all around, considering. And, the bottom line here is safety. These have been difficult intersections. One thing I would hope, and I would trust that the MoDOT engineers would do on this, given that we do have inbound approaching speeds of 55, the legal speed limit, people probably coming in at 60 or hotter, that there would be some type of active advance warning signal. Typically the yellow diamond with the flash, that's a standard, but then you can add on to that by making it active with the flashing yellow light to get people's attention. Your speed zone coming up, you got to slow down, even though they are going to make these large and easier to navigate, so it's not the little small ones like they have over there in Belton that you got to get down to about 20 to go through. So, but still, you want to make sure that drivers on approach, especially on a state highway coming in at the legal speed limit at 55, that they're going to know that in dark conditions or stormy conditions that you're going to be coming up into a big traffic change here. So slow down, wake up and pay. We can't force that on everybody, but at least give them every option that they know. I'm sure that they have contingency for that. So. Looks pretty good. Thank you for passing this on to us. This is, again, good information. We knew this was coming, and we got a lot more data. Any other questions on the MoDOT improvements out on 58? And then I think Mr. Fearborn has, for item C, the mayor's board and commission appointments. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
I have not seen these, so
These are actually from the mayor. He asked me to pass them out in absentia, and I can explain it once you all have it. Okay. You will note this is the exact same appointment to boards and commissions sheet that you saw on the 20th of May with the mayor's designated appointments for your consideration. There is one change to the sheet and there is one addition to the sheet. You will note they are both in green and italic. The Ward 3, Mr. Heath is having to resign. He is moving from Ward 3 to Ward 4, and there will be that time frame where he couldn't even be at large. He has to wait 6 months before he can apply for another appointment. The mayor is planning to appoint Joshua Collier. Joshua Collier lives down by Hawk Ridge Park and is very, very excited about that particular project. It got him very interested in what the Parks Board was doing, and so we have, you see attached to there, Mr. Mustine got in touch with him at the mayor's request, and he is very willing and enthusiastic to serve. The mayor also would ask the council to note a change to the Ward 4 appointment to turn it into a reappointment for another 3-year term. And he once again indicated that if any of the council has any comments or questions, while he is going to be out of town, once again in Las Vegas, just keeps going back and forth, he will be available by phone at any point in time if you'd like to contact him. That concludes staff reports this evening, sir.
Any comments? A couple things I can add. Jim Heath was appointed during the time both Kevin and I have been on the board. Has been a good member. He had said that once he fulfills his requirements, if there's a need, he would like for me to pass on to you all that he would certainly be interested in serving on the Parks Board again. I don't know if he needs to fill out another application or not, but he did want to express it. He did send an email to both me and Councilmember Barber and had notified Mr. Fearborn in advance. He already knew about that. I am excited about Mr. Collier coming on. It's kind of a unique scenario in addition to him being a first responder with South Metro and being intelligent and excited about the position. The fact that he's going to live up there, I think, is a really good thing for us. He's going to be right in the heart of one of our newest parks and one we're going to be doing a lot of work on. So if there are any questions or misconceptions from his neighbors, he will be right there to answer them for us. So I think that's fantastic. That's all I had. I just kind of wanted to let everybody know about that, some last minute changes that the mayor made. So anybody else? Anything? Do we have anything under other this evening, sir?
We do not, sir.
And we do not have reason to go into executive. Does anybody else have anything under other? We do not have reason to go into executive session, so we're done for the evening. Thank you for your time.
I heard